So I want to change a little bit the page compared to the previous presentation and argue that redefining prosperity is not just about changing the indicators and the data we use to measure it, crucial as this is, and it's very crucial, I'm not denying that. But I want to argue that it is also a lot about listening to and valuing different existing models of prosperity that are under attack. Models other than those based on a one-way future consisting only of growth. No, sorry. Yeah. So I want to talk about the Mediterranean approach to prosperity, but let's see what is this. So we in the West, and I talk about West in a general sense here, tend to take the meaning of terms like progress, prosperity, or development for granted. But as the recent scientific research on the so-called pluriverse of post-development shows, there are many, many different ways civilization across the world have thought and practiced the good life and have come to conceive well-being. From Buen Vivir and Summa Causa in Latin America to Ubuntu in Africa, Swaraj in India, Ibadism in the Arab world, or Hurai among the Chinese Tuva people. I didn't know all these different visions of well-being, and I learned them by reading this book by my colleagues. As a Greek, I'm Greek, you might have guessed from my name, I'm particularly keen on Mediterranean versions of prosperity, visions that chart, in the words of the late Italian sociologist from Bari, Franco Cassano, a different path that by decommodifying at least in part the sun and the sea, makes them become again shared public properties and the center of Southern identity. A path that removes the negative sign from all statistics of the South because it stops comparing with that which is other than itself. All this might sound a little bit poetic and rhetorical. Is there empirical evidence on the ground, however, of such an alternative Mediterranean or Southern path and how it works? Studying Mediterranean models of prosperity brought me 8 years ago now to the island of Ikaria in Greece. This is the island apparently where people forget to die, according to the most downloaded and popular article in the New York Times magazine in 2012. The New York Times shared there the story of Stamatis Moraitis, the guy in the picture, a Greek American who diagnosed with terminal cancer in 1976, moved back to Ikaria to die. 46 years later, 102 years old, Moraitis was still alive and cancer-free. So don't rush to go to Ikaria, but it's true, it's a true story. The article, written by Dan Buettner, a National Geographic Fellow, shows how the mystery of exceptionally long lives in islands like Ikaria or Sardinia in Italy or Okinawa in Japan, what is called the blue zones, is not explained just by a single factor, but by a combination of several things. Healthy, lean, mostly vegetarian diets, homegrown food, not so rigid work schedules, important for all of us here to remember, lots of walking, lots of talking and lots of socializing, as for example in Ikaria's notorious summer festivals. They are the other picture, obviously, and they do indeed go like that around until you're dizzy. The article confirms, in line with the latest scientific research by psychologists, and this is a study that came out this year by Harvard University, psychologists at Harvard University, that published the study of adult development, which is an 85 years long study of following people and looking at what determines their well-being over time. That what makes people happy is not money, is not class, but it's social relations, it's social bonds, it's family, community, and friends. In academic jargon, we use the not-so-perfect term degrowth to signify this model of prosperity, which is based on simplicity, relating and sharing, instead of having, accumulating and consuming. When I was presenting degrowth in a public event in Ikaria, when I was doing my research there, a local interrupted me protesting. But this is how we have been living for ages. What are you presenting to us here, you know? And she was right. As we documented with our subsequent research with my co-authors in this paper, the island indeed sustains a low pace and low impact mode of living based on diverse economies and persevering communal institutions. I'm often told by critics of degrowth that people want more, you know, more money, more stuff, more everything. How are we going to convince the people? It's the standard argument, no? But that's not what I observed in Ikaria. And that's not what I see even in the New Yorkers who burn a fortune to fly all the way to Ikaria to get just a few days' taste of the good life. People will never buy into degrowth, I hear. Well, they are already doing it, and they are paying a lot, actually. I don't mean to idealize life in Ikaria. And that has always to be the caution reminder here when we look for models that can inspire us. The locals I interviewed there talk not only of the good life, but also of the hard life. How austerity cuts at the time, and continued since then, were leaving them without hospital and schools. How cheap imports were killing local farms and orchards, leaving few economic alternatives other than the vulgar type of tourism and real estate development that one starts finding in islands nearby, next to Ikaria, like Mykonos. And in Greece, that's like a very important part of the public debate right now. The destruction of the islands and of a way of life, of summer life that has been important for all of us Greeks, in the name of tourist development, money from tourism, paying the debts in the name of GDP growth. My point here, of course, is not that all of Europe should become like Ikaria or Ikarias, but that as a minimum, Ikarias, places like Ikarias, should be allowed to stay the way they are. The thesis I support here is not moral, but is based on evidence. There are, and there have always been, other models of being and relating, well-functioning models of prospering with little. We don't need to reinvent anything. We don't need to reinvent models of prosperity. We just have to look around at what already exists and which is being demolished as we speak. These models are not in the south in a sense of a geographical south. These models of prosperity, I imagine, and I'm sure that they are, in the French or German countryside, the Alps, Scandinavia, the Balkan mountains, or the Hungarian plains that I haven't visited, but I'm sure they exist there too. The problem is that unless we talk about them and we learn to see them, these different ways of prospering, we will never study them, we will never understand them, we will never value them, and our statistics will keep missing them. So some questions to finish. What would a new model of EU convergence look like? One in which not only the South has to become more like the North, in a context of stability and growth and convergence, but also the North more like the South. And as I said, to avoid the labeling of a romantic Greek here, I mean south, not geographically, I mean it figuratively and in terms of center and periphery. How would we measure progress in regions like Ikaria with metrics other than those that put a negative sign on their presumed backwardness and underdevelopment that supposedly needs help in order to modernize and grow? What would a Commission program bound to support alternative beyond growth models of development, really beyond growth models of development in Europe's peripheries would look like? What policies and what moneyed interests are destroying right now such peripheries in the name of development and modernization? And importantly, how can we generalize the wisdom we find in places like Ikaria, bringing healthy diets, local, low-impact food, sustainable work schedules and rhythms, and communal forms of producing and celebrating all over Europe? I am a researcher and I like to pose questions, which is a comfortable position. The good thing is that the European Research Council has decided to support us, me, my colleague Julia Steinberger, and Jason Hickel, to develop 6 years of research asking this and many other questions, and I think we're going to come up with some tentative answers. But I think there are many clever people also in this room, and I'm really happy to discuss them with you. Thank you.